after this class, Ashley will email you a couple of articles, that you would have been reading anyway. So thank you for waiting and for understanding. I live in Peyton, so I had left my house and I had everything timed for me to be right here at 6 o'clock sharp, and of course, there's traffic and delays. So we are going to be talking about discipline tonight. My name's Jacque Thurman. I'm the clinical director at Hope and Home. I've been here since 2002. I took a few years off to stay home with my kids. And now my son is 14 and my daughter's 11. So, I've been teaching this class for a long, long time. And it can be a lot to swallow in 2 hours. It's a topic that we are continually helping our parents with. It's a topic that we're continually providing ongoing education. And as you guys know, once you're certified, we will have support groups on a monthly basis that you guys will go to, and in those support groups we provide ongoing training. And so we do, topical training. So 1 month we might do how to handle bedwetting. Another month we might do how to handle, tantrums. So we continue to equip you and provide ongoing education. So that is just to let you know that we're not going to cover everything tonight pertaining to discipline. This is more of a basics class. You guys had Volume 7 last week with Ashley, so you went through the quiz and you probably have already signed off on the Volume 7 discipline rules and regulations. So we're not going to spend time going over that. One thing that I get asked a lot, after people go through Volume 7 and sign all the discipline, prohibitions, the question is, well, what can we do? How do we discipline, kids in foster care? And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I am going to try to keep my talking to a minimum. Probably the longest I'm going to talk is just right here in the beginning, to give you guys an overview, and then we'll have some videos and some activities that we'll do together. So just keep in mind, it's a big topic, and we're going to just narrow our focus tonight. So in a couple more weeks, we're going to have the advanced discipline class where we'll go more in depth with some certain things. But tonight, we're going to focus on what is discipline. And then what are some simple strategies that you can use as a foster parent, when you're working with traumatized kids. Has everyone in here had Julie's class, attachment and loss? And so, you've gone over some of the trauma dynamics. So you know that kids who come into foster care have experienced trauma. We get, El Paso County gets like 13,000 calls per year of hotline reports. And so that means teachers or doctors or neighbors might see bruises on a kid, and they'll report it to DHS's hotline. Well, DHS can't possibly, investigate every single call, so they have a team that triages, these calls, and they screen out the ones that don't need to be investigated, and they place a really high, they assess and determine, priority. Of those 13,000 phone calls that DHS gets every year, only 300 kids are removed from those homes. So DHS really tries to work with the family and put services in place to keep kids in their homes. to, support families. They do everything they can to avoid removing kids from their homes. But in some cases, the risk is just that great. Either the risk is that great, the risk of imminent danger is very real, or the children have already experienced, significant abuse or neglect. So I say that so that you know that the kids coming into foster care, represent like the most dire and severe cases of abuse and neglect. They may come into care and they'll be cute and they'll be beautiful and they'll look a lot of times just like any kids, that you would see in school or at church, But, one thing that you have to remember is that these kids do represent the most severe cases of abuse or neglect. So whenever we're thinking about disciplining kids in foster care, we have to keep in mind where they've come from. We have to keep in mind that authority figures have let them down. Authority figures have either not met their needs or caused them harm. And we have to remember that, we're foster parents, even though we are, technically an authority figure, we still represent all that's wrong with the authority figures in their lives. And so, being able to step back and just remember that they've been wounded, by parents and authority figures and people who are supposed to keep them safe. So having said that, what is discipline? I know, even when I use the word discipline in this class, even hearing it come out of my own mouth, there's somewhat of a negative connotation with that word. For me, it evokes kind of an idea of causing some kind of discomfort for a child in order to teach them a lesson. What do you guys think of when you think of the word discipline? What does discipline mean to you in the context of disciplining children? What comes to mind?
Well, for our own kids, exactly what you just said. But now that we've kind of gone through a couple of these classes, I'm thinking totally different now than somebody else's child. But maybe more redirecting instead of what you just said.
Yeah.
That's all I thought.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Just like guidance, like helping guide them to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Maybe teaching right from wrong.
Yeah. So discipline, the word actually means to teach. It doesn't mean to punish. It means to teach. And whenever we think about discipline, whenever we can frame it in that way that we're teaching, and that teaching doesn't require pain, teaching doesn't require discomfort, we can really begin to kind of shift the way we think about discipline and how we implement discipline. So a couple of, again, this is, hopefully going to be the most that I end up talking tonight, but, I want to give you 5 principles, to guide you as you navigate, teaching children. Punishment tends to be about revenge. Punishment tends to be about making the parent feel better. Some parents will say, I feel like I'm a bad parent if I don't punish him for that. Or, I feel like I'm not teaching him anything if he doesn't, get some kind of consequence for that. There's punishment that really is derived out of a sense of revenge for the parent. You know, a kid caused some kind of discomfort or some kind of trouble for you. You know, you kind of want him to pay for it. And so, you know, what we're going to learn tonight is that teaching children is not about parental revenge. Okay, it's not about alleviating parental discomfort. It's really about you know, taking a child by the hand, you know, and leading him. As a matter of fact, when Paul says in Colossians, I don't have it right here on the tip of my tongue. You know, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Don't come down hard on them. Instead, take them by the hand and lead them in the way everlasting. Exasperate right there means irritate beyond measure. And Paul says, don't do that. Don't irritate them beyond measure. You know, instead get down at their level, you know, and walk with them and lead them and show them the way. So having said that, we're going to just go over 5 kind of guiding principles of discipline and of love to nurture. There's 5 pillars that guide us. Okay? One is it's relationship based. Discipline is relationship based. That means there needs to be a sense of trust, and there needs to be a sense of emotional safety. And I'll show you a video in a minute that kind of sums this up. You know, the goal and the role of foster parents is, yes, on the surface, to provide a safe and loving home. But beyond that, your role is to provide a healing environment for children who have experienced trauma. Trauma healing does not occur in a therapist's office. Okay? It occurs in your home. It occurs in the context of relationship with you. It occurs when children feel safe and they have an adult who really cares about them and who loves them and can see past their shortcomings and past their mistakes. So healing trauma takes place in your home, in your family, in the context of safe, nurturing relationships. That is your highest goal and calling as a foster parent, is to create a healing environment for kids who have been traumatized. The second pillar or principle that we use in guiding how we discipline children is developmental stages. I encourage all parents to become students of child development. You know, nobody knows it all, you know, in terms of child development. I am, you know, forever going to be a student of child development. And when you even just have a basic introductory level understanding of some of the stages kids move through developmentally, it can help you have realistic expectations. And why are realistic expectations important? Because they're fair. If we expect a 2-year-old to sit still for 30 minutes, that's not a realistic expectation. You know, if we expect a 6-year-old to sit still for 30 minutes and then punish him when he doesn't, you know, that's not the 2-year-old problem, that's our problem, because we have a problem with expectations. If we have a general understanding of child development, we can then, you know, have more realistic expectations of kids and not punish them for something they're not developmentally capable of doing. Another thing that I would like you to really remember about developmental stages is kids all develop at different rates, at different paces. They, hit milestones when they're ready. Even under the best of circumstances, child development is not, just one steady climb, okay? Even under the best of circumstances, child development is more like this. You take a step forward and then you regress a little bit. And so, kids, all throughout their life and development do this dance between dependence and independence. And so keep in mind that when kids are navigating stressful situations, they may regress in some areas. I mean, bedwetting, for example. Bedwetting, we know, can be genetic. It tends to run in families. It can also be triggered by emotional stress. And so a child who has previously been dry at nighttime, when he's placed in foster care, or whenever he goes from one foster home to another, or whenever he starts preschool after being home with mom all day, navigating those changes requires a lot of energy. And so it leaves less energy for previous skills that he has previously mastered. So regression is just part of child development, okay? And it's especially part of kids in foster care who have been traumatized and who are constantly having to navigate, big life changes. So whenever kids regress, we don't want to take it personally. We don't want to label it as manipulative or attention seeking. What we want to do is remember that whatever this child's navigating in his life, and maybe we don't know, maybe it's not obvious, but something's taken a lot of his energy, and he is going back to a place where he felt more nurtured. So when kids regress, that's one way of telling us that they need a little more TLC. And usually when we can lean into it and not resist it and meet the need under the behavior, give them that TLC, they'll bounce right back. We had a family, a long time ago, we licensed a family, and a lot of times people do just breeze through the certification process and they say and do all the right things, and then when they have kids in their home, it's like true colors. And so we went through this process with the family and realized quickly we really don't want our kids in this home. So we closed the home, and years later we got a call from DHS, and DHS was saying, we're opening a case on this lady, but she's saying she used to be licensed with you guys. And we're like, oh yes, she was licensed with us, but not for long, and here's why. So the reason DHS was just calling us is they had gotten a call from the school where her kids go to school. And you know what? This is what I say. Every parent does the best they know how to do. I believe that every parent, parent does the best they know how to do. And so, when I talk about, certain examples, it's not to judge at all, okay? It's to just give an example of what really happens, in our town. And even with, the most well-intended parents. So this lady had adopted 2 girls from Haiti after the earthquake. And these 2 girls had truly been orphaned. They had lost their parents in the earthquake. And so this family, again, you have to have a big heart, if you're going to, reach out to kids across the world and give them a home. So I'm not saying this lady's bad, at all. She obviously had a big heart, to take in and adopt 2 children. But, there's so much parenting advice out there that is so misguided that it causes kids harm. And so even when parents are kind of implementing this, I believe their intent is good. But, you know, with Hope and Home Families, I want you guys to have an edge, you know, and to be able to recognize, you know, when something is going to be humiliating or degrading or harmful to a kid. Because you have a lot of experts out there saying to do this stuff. But these girls were 5 and 6, and they were wetting their beds at night. And so the school called DHS one day when the girls had shown up in their urine-soaked pajamas, and they had notes pinned to their pajamas. This is here in Colorado Springs, had notes pinned to their pajamas saying, "This is my natural consequence for wetting the bed." And so, you know, I don't know whatever happened with that. I know DHS investigated. You know, I'm not privy to, you know, what they ended up doing. But, you know, there's just a point when, you know, certain parenting strategies or discipline, you know, she's trying to teach them not to wet their beds by humiliating them and degrading them. Whenever, again, we know that these girls had been moved across the world. They were in a completely new culture, new family, and, you know, they lost their parents very suddenly. So whenever we have kids come into our home, I want us to do better than that. I want us to really understand where these kids have come from and understand what their emotional needs are. Because as one of the videos I'm about to show says, you know, kids are not going to learn from somebody they don't like. And so, you know, that's where the relationship and trust and emotional safety comes in. And then developmental stages, understanding, you know, where kids are developmentally, understanding that regression is just part of child development. And then also looking at kids' emotional age rather than their chronological age. So you'll have kids who come into foster care who may be 8 or 9 chronologically, but emotionally they're more like 3 or 4. And so we want to relate to them where they are emotionally and you know, kind of tailor our expectations, you know, in different situations to their emotional age more than their chronological age. So 3 is, you know, it's trauma wise, okay? We know that trauma is in the body, it's not in the event, it sets off, you know, a whole cascade of physiological responses, and it can manifest in, you know, behavior. So whenever you have a kid who has, you know, experienced trauma, they may shut down. They may seem to be checked out. They may appear that they're not listening to you or that they're ignoring you. And that can literally be a survival mechanism, because whenever we experience trauma, our brains release endogenous opioids, which is the brain's equivalent to morphine. And so it's a very numbing effect. And you guys have probably experienced that if you've ever lost a loved one or, you know, had something really upsetting happen very suddenly, losing a job or being in a car accident. You can just feel kind of numb, you know, right in the wake of that. Of course, we've all read stories of, you know, hikers who have been pinned down by boulders and they say they don't feel anything, you know, until they're finally in the hospital. That's the endogenous opioids kicking in to help us survive. So for kids who come into foster care, it can manifest in kind of just being checked out. It can manifest in, you know, like looking right at you but not really hearing what you're saying. And so you've got to keep in mind how trauma impacts behavior. One of the best books I can recommend on trauma is Trauma Through a Child's Eyes. And it is on our approved reading list. It's by Peter Levine and Maggie Klein. So we always want to look at behavior through the lens of trauma. Number 4, we want to base our discipline on the uniqueness of each child. Okay? Every child has a different temperament and a different history. They have different things that motivate them. Some children require more firmness. Some children, you barely look at them as if you're disappointed and they collapse into tears. So we've got to, keep in mind every child's different. We don't discipline or parent with a one-size-fits-all approach. Okay, we tailor our approach to each child. What's effective for one might be catastrophic and really harmful to another. What is, harmful for another might not be anything, for the next kid. So we've got to pay attention to the temperament of the children, and we have to also be really in tune with ourselves. We have to know what our temperaments are too. And because we're the grown-ups, and big people take care of little people, we have the maturity to be able to flex our style, to be able to flex our expectations to meet the child where he or she is. And so we've got to be in touch with our own temperament as well. There are some parents and kids who just do this all the time. And, a lot of that is on the parent. A parent has got to be able to flex and figure out how to work with that child so they're not doing this all the time. A parent's got to figure out how to work with that child rather than against it. So every child's different. Dignity of the child. This is a big one. We talk about a scenario where a child forgets his lunch at at home. And so he calls his mom and, is letting her know that he forgot his lunch. And, there's a lot of parenting advice out there. Again, well-intended. It's an attempt to get away from, authoritarian parenting. It's an attempt to get away from corporal punishment. But that parent will say, "Bummer, you forgot your lunch. I guess if you go hungry today, you'll learn and you'll remember your lunch tomorrow. You'll choose to remember your lunch tomorrow." And so that's a strategy that's very, very popular today in our culture. But how would it feel if you, as an adult, you're stuck at work, you're trying to make a deadline, you rushed out the door this morning, went off and left your wallet, and you don't have any time to leave, to go home and get your wallet. You don't have time to leave your desk because you're really trying to make this deadline. And so you call your spouse and say, "I was just in such a hurry this morning, I went off and left my wallet. I'm never going to be able to make it through this day if I don't get food in me because I didn't eat breakfast because I was in such a hurry this morning. Do you think you could drop something off, or do you think you could bring me my wallet or order something for me?" How would it feel to you if your spouse said, "Bummer, you chose to forget your wallet. I guess you will have to go hungry today, and tomorrow you'll choose to remember your wallet"? I mean, wouldn't that just feel really icky, you know, if you had another adult say that to you? First of all, nobody chooses to forget. That's an oxymoron. And nobody chooses to remember. It's an oxymoron. You know, life happens. You know, we get going out the door and, you know, forget things sometimes. And so, can we also remember the dignity of the child whenever we are figuring out a way to teach a child? If it's not something that you would do to a spouse or a friend or a coworker, if it's not something you would want done to you by a spouse or friend or coworker, why is it okay to do that to children? Because children, I mean, they can't really, you know, defend themselves, or, you know, they don't have the resources and coping skills at their fingertips like we do. And that's not to say that children have the same roles as grown-ups. You know, as grown-ups, it's our job to take care of the little people. It's our job to guide them and teach them and keep them safe. But it is to say children deserve the same amount of respect that we would give to a spouse or friend or coworker. They deserve the same level of respect. So, dignity of the child. And finally, I guess it's six pillars instead of 5. Finally, our discipline is grace-based. What does that mean? Grace-based. If you've grown up in the church, you've probably heard grace defined as unmerited favor. If you study it further, it also means acceptance. And so whenever we want to teach children, whenever we discipline children, can we show them a lot of grace and understanding and acceptance? That doesn't mean we condone punching a hole in the wall. It doesn't mean we condone kicking the dog. It doesn't mean we condone, you know, hitting a sibling. But can we show some degree of understanding and acceptance with these kids? Can we show some patience? Can we show some flexibility with kids when they mess up? I mean, we all mess up still. You know, we're grown-ups, and none of us has perfect impulse control 100% of the time. Do we? Anybody in here have perfect impulse control all the time? And so, you know, back to kind of the developmental stages piece, we all know the magical age when our car insurance rates drop drastically. What's that number? 25. And that's based on neuroscience, because, you know, the front part of the brain that's responsible for logic and consequential thinking and rationalizing and predicting risk doesn't really come to full fruition until sometime in the mid-20s. And so a driver who's 25 or 26, based on neuroscience and child development, is going to be a much safer driver than someone who's even 20 or 21. And you guys can think back to those ages in your development. There are probably things you would have done at 20 or 21 that you wouldn't dream of doing at 26 or 27, because your brain is more developed, and those areas of impulse control and consequential thinking and everything are coming to full fruition, you know, in the mid-20s. So with kids, we know their brains develop from the bottom up, back to front, right to left. So the feeling center develops before the thinking center of the brain. So this is where we get tantrums, you know, in little kids and toddlers. They feel things very, very intensely, but they don't yet have the ability to articulate those feelings. They don't have the vocabulary they need to talk about their feelings. They don't have the ability to see it from a different perspective. You know, those are all executive functions, and those are all coping skills we all as adults have at our fingertips. We can step back and look at a situation from a different perspective or point of view. We can journal. We can pour out all of our intense feelings in a journal with all of this rich vocabulary that we have as adults. We can, talk to a friend or a therapist about our intense feelings. We have all kinds of coping skills at our fingertips because our brains are more developed. And so whenever we can step back and remember that kids' brains develop over decades, okay? Over decades. And whenever we can also look at ourselves and remember we're not perfect, even with a fully developed brain, we still mess up. It can give us a lot more compassion and empathy and patience with kids whenever, we realize that, they're just doing the best they can. They're going to make mistakes. I'm not, to be their judge. Kids are not fixer-uppers. We are not project managers. And that is how a lot of people tend to look at parenting. As, there's this, and this wrong with the kid, and it's my job to fix it. When you're foster parents, your job is to create a healing environment for children. Whenever they feel safe, and it takes time, whenever they feel safe, they will begin to heal. And when they begin to heal, they'll pull it together. But, I think it's important for us, as foster parents, just to, remember each of these things, to guide us whenever we are wanting to teach or discipline children. Relationship-based, your home is a place of healing and safety. Kids don't learn from people they don't like. Let's remember developmental stages so we can have appropriate expectations and not punish kids for, stuff they're not even capable of doing. Let's remember that, regression's part of child development. It's not manipulation. It's not, necessarily attention seeking. It does signal that they need a little more TLC. We want to remember these kids have been traumatized. Trauma is a physiological response in the body that does impact behaviors. We talked about endogenous opioids and that kind of numbing effect. Another physiological response of trauma is hypervigilance. And so what does that look like in everyday behavior? It can look like a kid who can't sit still, or who can't pay attention in class, or, who can't sit at the dinner table more than 2 minutes. That hypervigilance, and that's a physiological response with the adrenaline and cortisol, flooding their systems. And it's a survival mechanism. It's not wrong. It's a survival mechanism. Uniqueness of each child. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Dignity of the child. Can we give children the same respect that we give grown-ups? It's not that children play the same roles, but can we give them the same level of respect? And grace-based. We don't expect perfection. Grace-based doesn't mean condoning, but we can show compassion and understanding when kids mess up. So having said that, let me go back to my outline because I know that we are on a tight schedule. I want to make sure that we stay on task. So what I'm going to do now is show you guys a video. One of the, okay, those are all the guides. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 practical things that you can immediately put into use. If you're a parent, you have kids in your home now, You know, you can immediately put these 3 things into use. And the first one is catch kids doing well. And we'll talk more about it. I'm going to show this video, and while it's playing, it's just about 13 minutes. I'm going to run to my office and grab some handouts. But this video, you know, I've seen it countless times, and I still get something out of it every time I see it. So as you're watching this, think about just some of the guiding principles we've talked about so far. And should be a signal. Why isn't there a signal? There we go. I got it back on. Accidentally turned it off. This is a TED Talk that Rita Pearson did years ago. Unfortunately, she's since passed away, but what a legacy she has left. When kids come into foster care, you know, their internal working model, what they believe about themselves is they're not lovable, they're not worthy, they can't get their needs met. You know, they have this internal sense of just being bad or second-class citizens. And so in creating a healing environment for kids, we want to change that internal working model. And we want to find something that they do well and celebrate that. There we go. Just going to press play while I have it up there and quit talking. Full screen.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it, they should learn it, case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell the kids you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. I said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. Have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. 4 years I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection. It's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
Somebody laughed really hard when she said, "You know your toughest kids show up every day." So what did you like about that? What did you hear in that video that was refreshing and maybe a little bit different from what you're used to hearing?
I don't know if it's different, but just positive, just uplifting, and seeing the bright side, the 2 right instead of the 18 wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts or ideas? What did you like about the video?
Everything. It was a good video.
What about +2?
Yeah.
I have never heard of any teacher saying +2 to a kid who missed 18 out of 20.
What's refreshing is that she recognizes that what's more important than the grade is how the child feels.
Yes.
That's way more important.
Yes.
It's wonderful that she keeps that perspective no matter how difficult it gets in day-to-day minutia and behaviors that must present themselves from the kids that she's teaching. You can tell that she's one of those people that just can always maintain that long view, that long game perspective.
Yeah. And that kid will always remember that teacher. And she, that kid, whoever he was, he or she was, will always remember that teacher who didn't lecture him or shame him, for missing 18 out of 20. I mean, that's pretty exceptional, for a teacher to be able to make a child feel okay, even though he did really poorly. And so I don't want us to get confused. We're not saying let's celebrate F's. But like you said, it's so much more than the grade. Can we find a sliver of something they're doing well? Can we find a sliver of something they did right and focus on that rather than reinforcing that internal working model that they're bad and they're dumb and they can't do anything right? That's your job. It's not to produce a straight A student, not to produce perfect attendance. Those things will come. They will come in time. But right now, this child is in crisis and this child needs to feel safe, and that takes time. But once that child feels safe and once, he's healing from that trauma, the skills will come, but later. And so we can't expect too much too soon. Just to further illustrate this, we're going to do a little optical illusion exercise. So if everyone would please take one. This one will take about 5 minutes. Everybody have one? So just ignore this creepy looking person at the top. It was on the same page as the optical illusion that I wanted, and it just got stuck there. So ignore that. So what we're going to do, I just want to plug my phone in because it's dying. Just need my timer for this. So what I want to have you do is, you see the two circles at the top? We're going to focus on that dot that's right in the middle of the purple circle. And what I want you to do is, when I start the timer, I want you to focus on that dot, on nothing else on the page, nothing else in the circle, nothing but that dot. And we're going to do that for 45 seconds. Ready, set, and go. I need some background music, right? All right. Now I want you to move to the green circle. And again, focus on nothing but the dot in the green circle. And 3, 2, 1, go. The dot in the middle of the green circle. I know it seems like an eternity. We have 10 seconds left. Keep looking at that dot. And time. All right, go back to the purple one. Look at the dot in the middle of that purple circle. One more time. 30 seconds and go. Looking at the dot in the middle of the purple circle. Almost done. And take your eyes off that dot. 6 seconds left. And time. And one last time we're going to do that same thing with the green circle. Look at that dot for 30 seconds. Time starts now. Let's give it your full attention. Dot in the green circle. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I want you to look at the dot in the black and white circle right underneath the purple circle. Look at that dot. And now move your eye across the page to the dot in the black and white circle that's under the green circle. Do you notice anything? Now you're looking at the dot. You're going back and forth looking at the dot in the two black and white circles. Do you notice anything?
The lines are opposite ways.
Uh-huh.
It has a green tone to it.
Yes. 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 Did anybody else kind of pick up on like a green hue? You know, in a couple of those
That's right.
quadrants?
This one looked purple and that one looked green.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
exactly.
supposed to, but I
Yeah.
can never pick out the 3D things I'm not supposed to either.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of a fun optical illusion, but I see the green as well, like in these two quadrants. So the whole purpose of this optical illusion is just to illustrate that if we focus only on what kids are doing wrong, we focus only on their tantrums, only on when they don't listen, only on their inability to get out of bed in the morning, when we focus on, you know, their bickering with their siblings, if that's all we focus on, even when they're doing good, we're not going to be able to see it. It's going to be colored by what we're focused on. And I'll give you an example, a real life example. You know, there is he's grown now. He's like in the Air Force and he's doing super well now. But, you know, his journey was a rough one. His name is Sam. And he, you know, endured one of the most horrific cases of abuse, you know, in Colorado, he and his sister. His dad was put in prison for like having one of their siblings tied to a tree for days. And his sister was so badly neglected that she's blind now. She had an eye condition that could have been treated when she was young, but she was badly neglected. So they come from a really hard background, and they were adopted by, again, very well-intended, big-hearted, you know, single mom. And this kid could not do anything right in her eyes. He could not do anything right. And, you know, this is something we'll talk about in advanced attachment and loss, but she got this idea that this kid had a diagnosis that he didn't have. And so everything he did, she saw through the lens of that diagnosis. She didn't see it through the lens of trauma. She didn't see it through the lens of his background. You know, she couldn't see his behavior for what it was. She saw it through the lens of that diagnosis. And so everything he did, she pathologized, meaning she assigned a malicious motive to everything he did. So, for example, if she made a casserole and left it for them to have after school, and she came home and he had eaten the whole thing, you know, she couldn't see that as a growing teenage boy who really likes her cooking. She has to see it as malicious. He did that so nobody else could have any. And so she would assign those malicious motives, you know, to everyday kind of normal behavior. So if, you know, she was at open home with the kid and he was engaging and interacting with staff, she assigned a malicious motive. Well, he's being malicious. He's turning on the charm. You know, he's being malicious. So even when he was good, he was bad. Even when he was good, he was bad. He could do nothing right because of her perspective. And again, you know, once in a blue moon, you know, families will breeze through the licensing process, say and do all the right things. And then it's not until they have kids in their home that the true colors come out. And so in this particular case, you know, these true colors didn't come out for a long time. And so she had gone on to adopt these kids. She got through the DHS home study, the adoption study, and it was, you know, in the middle of a snowstorm in 2010 that the sister literally ran away from this lady's house because she was making these kids sit in their rooms with nothing no bedding, no furniture, no books, nothing. Sit in their rooms alone. And so this blind teenage girl, and we have her story on video. Blind teenage girl ran away from her home in the middle of a snowstorm. That's how miserable she was. And she's blind, she's lost, and somebody on the street pulls over and offers to help her, and she's like, I just need to call Hope and Home. If I can just get to Hope and Home, I'll be okay. And so she ended up at Hope and Home, in the middle of a blizzard, and she's telling us everything that's going on. Of course, we were required to report to DHS. In the meantime, we had a licensed foster family who was willing to, take her and her brother. And, DHS actually ended up removing the kids from the adoptive mom, and, she lost custody of them because she was being so crazy with them. But the kids ended up going on and being adopted. Lovely, lovely people. Hannah is now 22 or so. She's married. She has a baby. She's living in California. Our staff was just out there for a conference. So we met up with Hannah, and she came and had dinner with us. I mean, lovely, lovely person. And, I'm so glad, that we were able to be there for her, in the middle of a snowstorm. But, my point is, if we just focus on, the negative behavior, and we assign negative motives to everything, even when a kid's doing well, it's hard for us to see because our perspective is colored. We're going to start seeing the bad even when they're good. So it's important for us as well to catch kids doing well and to train ourselves to keep that perspective and help ourselves remember these kids come into care with a really, really negative internal working model, what they believe about themselves and what they believe about the world. And if we're going to create a healing environment and teach them, we want to change that internal working model and build on what they're doing well, build on what they're doing right, rather than continuing to reinforce that negative model and constantly bring them down. You guys have seen our Zundugal factory. We also,
I don't know what that is.
I don't think I do.
oh, okay. So whenever you guys do a tour of the building, downstairs on the first floor, just as you walk through the coffee shop, right there on the right is like this arcade kind of looking room.
Oh, yes.
And it has all the toys and like glow-in-the-dark paint and everything. So that's called our Zundugal factory. And so when kids come here, and they're in child care for support group or whatever, they are given Zundugals, and yes, exactly. They're given Zundugals. Yeah, so they can, go to the Zundugal factory either immediately after, immediately when the night's over and get a prize or something, or they can save their Zundugals and save them up for something, that they have their eye on in the store. And one thing that we teach parents is that the Zundugals are great to keep in your wallet, and just let it be a tangible reminder to you as a parent to catch kids doing well. So that's one little tip that you can put into practice right away, and you will notice when you start paying attention to what they're doing well, even if it's something super simple, even if you've had a really rough day, you can find something to reinforce and to give them kudos and give them a high five for. Even this morning, my son has to get up and go to the bus stop. He has to be at the bus stop by 6:30, and it is early. I've got to get him up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, he spends way too much time on video games. You know, he doesn't want to unload the dishwasher. You know, he doesn't want to spend time with the family. He wants to be on the phone with his girlfriend all the time. You know what? But I was able to say, nice job getting up this morning. That was really awesome. You got right up at 5 o'clock and we got to the bus stop on time. So, I mean, you can find something that a child did well and succeeded at some point during the day. I have another video to show you on that note. Have any of you met Rouse? Yeah. This video was done years back. He looks a little different now.
It's saying doodle. See?
That's my little boy when he was like 8. Oh. Sound great. Come on. Why isn't it playing? Play. Come on. Just a second ago. Oh well. We'll see if that ever loads. But we're not going to spend the whole class waiting for it. If it starts playing, we'll just stop and watch it. But we'll go ahead and move on. So, you know, one of the first practical things, catch kids doing well. The second practical thing that you can do, and you can put it into practice immediately, is avoid power struggles. The clinical staff and I, we're trying to come up with the key points, that we want families to take away from the discipline class. We can talk forever about research and theory and parenting styles and adult learning theory. We can talk forever about all of that, and it's interesting, but I don't know if it's really useful. And we'll go into some of that in the advanced discipline class. But one of the things that, we run into a lot, our home supervisors, our assistant clinical directors, is power struggles. We have, whenever we land a kid, whenever a kid ends up in a home, we want that kid to stay in that home, the whole, duration of the case, whether he reunifies with his parents or whether he needs to be adopted. Nobody likes to see kids bounced around in care. However, there have been times when we have to move kids because the parents are so locked in a power struggle and the parents are not willing to be flexible and they're not willing to give. It's all about winning. Like I said in the beginning, these kids have had authority figures in their lives who have hurt them, who have wounded them, who have harmed them, neglected them, not met their needs. And so, the last thing they need when they're in your home, which is going to be a healing environment, is another authority figure dominating them and winning. You know, kids need to be empowered to win every once in a while. And there's a myth that, you know, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and, you know, never let them win. I mean, this is prevalent in our culture, in our parenting culture, you know, just in general. You know, whenever you're creating a healing environment, you've got to avoid power struggles. And that means you've got to be secure enough and mature enough to be able to let a child win. Okay?
Can you give some examples of what kind of losing that we should be willing to do so that they win?
Right, yeah. Yeah, definitely. For example, we see a lot of power struggles over food. So kids who have come from really, you know, deprived backgrounds, I just have to watch the time, often will have to literally steal from a 7-Eleven just to be able to eat. They'll have to steal from their friend's lunchbox to have something to eat. You know, they don't know when their next meal is coming. Maybe they don't eat until 11 o'clock at night when mom's boyfriend brings home fast food. So they don't have that predictability, you know, with their basic needs being met. So sometimes when they come into foster care, they don't want the broccoli and grilled chicken, you know, that you've so lovingly made and placed before them. They haven't been exposed to that. That's not worth getting into a power struggle over. You know, you can't take it personally. Yes, you're trying to give them what they didn't have in their home. You're trying to give them nutrition, you know, and trying to teach them what family mealtime looks like. Great. That might be your need that you're meeting. It might not be their need. So when they turn their nose up at the grilled chicken or broccoli or tuna casserole, don't take it personally and have other things available. So if they just want a peanut butter sandwich, if they don't like what you've prepared, let them have a peanut butter sandwich. Okay? If they don't want to eat whenever you guys sit for dinner, don't make them eat. Let them eat when their bodies tell them they're hungry. So those kind of power struggles, I mean, can cause placements to blow out. The case study, you know, that we were going to look over tonight is about a 6 and 9-year-old who had been in a home, but the family had, you know, some personal stuff come up, and unfortunately they weren't able to follow through on the adoption. So the kids were moved to a newly licensed family, and, you know, on paper it was a perfect fit. You know, they were school-age children, they were legally free. This was a family he hadn't parented before, you know, the exact age that they had wanted. And this family even did respite. In other words, they had the kids over to their house for a weekend a couple of times, you know, to kind of see if this would be a good fit before the kids moved in. Well, you can imagine the grief and loss, you know, these kids are experiencing because they thought they were going to be adopted, and now they feel rejected, and it's just reinforcing that, you know, internal working model that I'm not wanted, and that I'm bad, and there must be something wrong with me. And so they're in this new home, and they lasted 2 weeks in that home because of power struggles. And you know what? It's not that we expect parents to be perfect. We know parents are going to mess up. We know there's trial and error with learning to parent traumatized kids. You know, we can work with that. But whenever we brought this family in, I mean, they had called at 2 weeks, you know, after the kids had been there for 2 weeks, and they had said, these kids are out of control. You have to get them out of our house and get them into respite. So, of course, we put them in respite, and just to kind of see what is going on, we brought them in. And, the family goes on to describe this kid who's having tantrums, 6-year-old, who's having tantrums when he doesn't get his way. Okay, well, let's look at this. Where is this child emotionally? He's just had a big, big change in his life. Maybe he's not 6 emotionally. Maybe he's more like 2 or 3 emotionally right now. Maybe he is melting down when he doesn't get his way because he just lost his family, But this family described a situation where this 6-year-old wanted pudding before dinner. And this was, a military dad, and he was just all about the respect and respecting authority and, teaching kids to respect authority, knowing who's boss. So, he said, no, you can't have pudding before dinner. And so it just turned into an epic power struggle. And that was the point whenever they said, these kids are out of control. So they came into Hope and Home, and we're just trying to see, can we work with you? Are you open to some coaching? Are you open to seeing this from a different perspective? We know foster care is hard, especially the first couple of weeks, but the dad, just sat there and just defiantly, righteously said, I am the alpha male in this house, and no 6-year-old boy is ever going to win in a battle against me. That's a little scary, and then he went on to describe, working with this child is, more difficult than being in the line of fire in combat. And we're like, okay, it doesn't sound like you're open. Yeah, doesn't sound like you're really open. And so, the other thing is it's not healthy for that child to be in a home with an adult who feels that way about him. And so, we were thinking this was a great fit. It was a great placement. They did respite with the kids. Everything went well. And then reality sets in, and it's just reality. And reality is a little bit hard sometimes. And so this was kind of normal behavior in the context of the situation. And we have, the foster dad saying, I'm the alpha male. No 6-year-old boy is going to win, in a battle with me. And dealing with him is more difficult than being shot at. Okay, so, we had to make a decision at that point. This isn't healthy for the kid, and so the kids ended up moving, and the family, wasn't able to remain licensed. They became very adversarial and, just, the way I felt dealing with him. I just imagine how a 6-year-old, must have felt. So when I say power struggles, we've got to be secure enough in who we are to let kids win. We've got to, not make mountains out of molehills. We've got to choose our battles. Food is a classic example of power struggles. Chores can be another example of power struggles. Remember, kids will learn those skills. They will learn those skills with time. Don't expect too much too soon, and be willing to let them have some say in their lives. This is not about first-time obedience. Creating a healing environment is not about first-time obedience. Okay? Kids are human. They need lots of reminders. They need a lot of grace. They need a lot of understanding. They need a lot of patience. Just like we do. Okay? They also are people. They're not robots. We don't want kids who are blindly obedient to authority. Okay? For kids to, quote, obey or cooperate, there's got to be some degree of trust there. Because they've been harmed, they've been abused, they've been let down by authority. And so the last thing they need is an alpha male standing over them saying, no way are you going to get pudding before dinner because I'm the alpha male. And, what I say goes. That's not what, that kid needed in that moment. So what would have been the harm? What would have been the harm if he had had some pudding before dinner? Okay, some people might say, well, if you give him this time, then he's going to learn that he can tantrum and manipulate you and get his way every time. That's catastrophizing. Okay, that's catastrophizing. We're looking at creating a healing environment, and we're looking at phases, and we're looking at stages. So, when a kid's been in your home for 2 weeks, and he's just lost his adoptive family, not to mention the trauma he experienced in his bio home, all of that, we can let that go, okay? We can be secure enough that if we create a healing environment, power struggle is not a healing environment, okay? Getting into a power struggle is not healing. And I know that there would be some who say, well, if you give in, they'll never learn. That's not true, okay? They will learn to trust you. They will learn that you're not trying to dominate or control them or, force them to do something they're not ready to do, or vice versa. They will learn that you're a safe person, and then they will be able to better accept limits. Yeah.
I have a question. For those of us that have small children, biological children already in the home, my husband and I are already anticipating that there's always going to be 2 different sets of rules. And so my question is, how do I explain to my almost 5-year-old that certain behaviors will have to be with our foster sister or brother that will not be acceptable to, that will not be tolerated from her because they come from a different background. We already have the trust with her. So different rules apply. How do I effectively teach her that what she sees us do with foster brother is going to be different from how we treat her? How do we...
Yeah, I mean...
Can I add on to that and just ask, is that the case? Can biological kids have a different set of rules within reason to...
I mean, really, when I've been teaching all of this kind of in the context of traumatized kids, but, Hope and Home is also about inclusion. Whenever your biological kids come to Hope and Home, they're just as much a part of the Zundugal factory and the Jericho Java and everything as, the kids in foster care. So, I mean, you can say to your child, she's still learning. She's still learning. Or he's still learning. Or he needs a little extra patience. You've had time to learn this.
I'm really going to write these down.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's one thing. And a lot of times you don't see your bio kids regress. Often, they're more moved with compassion, really, when they see, hurting kids, behave. But, you can frame it that way with young kids, they're still learning. It takes some time, for me to teach them. And so...
And you've had time to learn as well.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Can I throw something in with that?
Sure.
We had so many bio kids and so foster youth for so long that I think one of the things that you hear with your kids is they'll start complaining, but then what really worked well with us is you have to give your biological kids a lot of extra time too.
Yeah.
So if you hear them say, that's not fair, I don't get that, or what, or they just start doing things that are unusual to them, pushing, shoving, hurting, or just unusual behaviors. No, you think, that's what seemed to work. Then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, sure.
So then you've got to go back and forth.
Yeah.
And I just want to make a comment on what you said. I think this happened to us. Is you have times when you really dislike some of these kids because it's so traumatizing. You're talking about poop smearing, peeing on things, and there's some trauma that's so hard, and you just want to cry every day for them. But I think the only thing we could do, we save that. You have to save that for your pillow talk with your spouse and those private times that you have. Because you do need to express that your emotional needs are so big.
And that's why we have support group as well.
Yes.
That's why we have support group as well. What she said, a lot of people would say, well, that's being disingenuous or disingenuine. Whenever she says, as teachers, we are actors and actresses. We're not going to like every child, but they can't know that. And that's part of being a grown-up. Okay? That's part of being a grown-up. That's part of getting along, with other adults. And so it does go with kids as well.
But don't feel bad about yourself or feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like that military guy that she was talking about. No, that's not.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying. I like what you're saying, and I will, validate that and say.
I know I felt that.
Sure. You won't immediately fall in love with the kids in your home, and sometimes they will be challenging, to love, challenging to like. But you can process that. That's just kind of comes with the territory. It comes with the territory. You're getting kids in your home you've never met before. There's not going to be like this automatic chemistry, love at first sight type thing. It's the same myth, when moms have newborns, It might not be love at first sight.
Yeah.
It might take time for you to adjust and to, bond, with your baby. And it's the same with kids in care, It's not going to necessarily be like this love at first sight. It can be something that you choose to do. It might not be something you feel, but you choose to love them, with your actions. So the second thing is avoiding power struggles. We're almost out of time. So we'll move on to the very last one. Number 3 is meet needs underneath the behavior. The Bible says man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. That's something we want to cultivate and strive for as foster parents. We want to be able to look beyond the behavior, into the need underneath the behavior. Beth Moore says God sees beyond our sin into the depths of our need. That's something we want to strive for. It's not going to come naturally and it's not going to be easy, but with practice, you have to retrain the way you think. With practice, whenever you meet the needs under the behavior takes care of itself. You can try to extinguish behavior all you want, but if we're not getting under the behavior and meeting that emotional need for security, significance, or strength, it's just putting a Band-Aid on it. Okay, so when we talk about teaching kids, disciplining kids, we want to meet needs under the behavior, see beyond the behavior, and ask ourselves, what does this kid need right now? Okay, and that might mean, you know, in the heat of the moment, you're super frustrated, and this kid is really not likable at all right now, and what you would really like to do is just send him to his room and put him in timeout or something. What you can do instead is walk away. Walk away while you take time to take a mommy timeout, catch your breath, just step away and get some perspective. You know, there's not a rush and there's not a timer on you disciplining or correcting behavior. Okay, it's better for you to walk away than for you to, you know, reinforce that child's negative internal working model, or, you know, respond in a way that, you know, jeopardizes the emotional safety in the relationship. So give yourself permission to walk away to figure it out before you respond. You know, think about the needs under the behavior. I remember when my son was 3, I had just had my daughter, and he had been asking me all morning, Mom, let's play hide and seek, let's play hide and seek. And, you know, like any mom, I'm like, okay, in a little bit, you know, and I would go on with taking care of the baby or doing laundry or cleaning or whatever all morning. Mom, let's play hide and seek, let's play hide and seek. All right, Ty, in a little bit, you know, and I'll just go on my day. Well, you know, lunchtime came around, and the next thing I know, he's like hitting Brooke. And so I started to respond with, don't you dare ever hit your sister. But I was able to catch myself and say, oh, he's been wanting my attention all morning. And now he's getting it, but in a negative way. So let me just, like, reset the day, you know, diffuse this whole situation and give him what he needs, which is my attention. So instead of, you know, really coming down hard on him, you know, for whatever he did, you know, I was able to say, okay, never mind, Ty. Let's just move on. Let's play hide and seek for a while. And it just reset, you know, the whole tone of the day. But I was at a crossroads, you know. I could have, you know, gotten into a power struggle or tried to punish or discipline the behavior. But instead, wait, he's been trying to get my attention all morning. Okay, let me meet that need. So that's something else. And it takes practice. You know, you're not going to, you know all the time what the need is. But it's a good training exercise. One thing that, you know, is worth repeating when we talk about disciplining kids is, you know, to effectively teach and discipline kids, we've got to discipline ourselves. And there's a learning curve whenever you have to practice a lot of self-discipline and self-control, whenever you have to walk away while you figure out how to respond. That's okay. You know, this isn't going to be, you know, something that you necessarily master, you know, your first time around. It takes practice. And so give yourself permission, you know, to make mistakes. And again, you know, I don't want to scare anybody with the example, you know, of the pudding before dinner power struggle. You know, so again, we don't expect anybody to be perfect. We don't expect anybody to, you know, ace this 100% of the time. We do expect you to be open to feedback. We do expect you to be able to look back at your behavior and say, I messed that up. You know, what can I do different next time? You know, a sense of teachability. And that teachability is a skill that I teach my kids about, you know, now. You know, when they're kids, you know, you have to be teachable. You won't last in any job if you're not teachable. You've got to be able to take feedback. And it goes for us as grown-ups and adults too. So just know that We've just barely hit the tip of the iceberg, with discipline. With your support groups, you'll get more practical, topical type tips along the way. You have your home supervisor, and always, I'm available to meet with you in person if you are kind of hitting the wall, with a particular behavior or kid. I'm always happy to just think through it with you and process. And what I do, I don't like prescribe answers. I ask questions. I ask lots and lots of questions. And as you're answering them, you start putting pieces together. And usually you arrive at, a strategy yourself, So just know that, the staff is here to walk with you, every step of the way if you get to a point that you're finding it challenging. We've had, and just to illustrate one more thing, we've had families really mess up, with kids, power struggles or, different punitive discipline techniques, and they were able to come in, we were able to work with them and coach them, and they went on to be foster parents for another couple of years. So, we expect mistakes, but we also expect, coachability and teachability, and we expect to be able to problem solve together, when you run into difficult behaviors. So, having said that, those are the 3 things you can put into practice right away. Catch kids doing well, avoid power struggles, meet needs under behaviors. Any last thoughts, questions, or comments? I apologize that I do have to rush out of here because I've got to pick my kid up at 8:15, but I have a couple of minutes if anybody has a question, thought, or comment.
I just thought that was so great that you said that you're there to just work through some of these issues, that none of us should be afraid or feel shame about anything, because that's when it becomes hidden.
Yes.
And then gets
that's so
magnified
right.
and worse. Don't feel shame. Just
that's great.
Say,
and please, don't struggle alone. Don't struggle alone.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for being patient with me and waiting for me, and I hope you guys have a good night. And look forward to getting to know y'all better. Once you're licensed, you'll be in my support group for the first 3 to 6 months. So I'll get to know you better through support groups, so that you get to know me better in the beginning. I get to know you better in the beginning, and when you encounter challenges down the road, it's easier to work things out and work together.
Was there anything we needed to turn in? No, there wasn't a
nothing to turn in. Did everybody sign in? I guess yes. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll see you later.
Turn on our city
I
water.
bet that will have
You know what this is right here?
She already